Benny Hill was the most successful comedian the world has ever known. He was the lad from Southampton who did the rounds of the music halls and working men's clubs doing the jokes, and ended up being lauded by television audiences in 90 countries.
Have you ever seen a funny TV show that millions of people around the world couldn't stop watching? Then all of a sudden, it was over? The Benny Hill Show went through the same thing. For many years, it was funny, quick, and easy to remember.
Run and jump, and here comes Terry Lucas, and it's not her best. It's not her best at all, no. But I think that Sid Tidworth here will pick up a point or two. Here he comes now.
But one shocking sketch changed everything. It made people angry instead of laughing, and it brought down a hero. Do not leave now, as you are about to see the scene that closed everything. The making of Benny Hill. Alfred Hawthorne Hill was born in Southampton in the mid-1920s. Though even his exact year of birth has been debated, some records say 1924, others 1925. His father ran a store that sold surgical instruments, which was a realistic job that was not related to show business. However, show business ran in the family. His grandfather had been a clown in the circus, and he left behind a tradition of performance that had a quiet effect on Alfred's imagination as a child. Life wasn't funny before comedy. He drove cars, brought milk, stacked shelves at Woolworths, and even played drums. Even though none of these jobs looked fun, they taught him an important lesson: how people act when they think no one is looking. He learned to notice small things in these daily situations, and that skill would later form the basis of his humor. Then there was the Second World War, which changed everything. Alfred learned how to fix engines and cars as a mechanic in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. Later, he worked as a driver and a searchlight operator, where he helped guide beams across dark skies to show enemy planes what they were doing. But it wasn't until he was moved to the Combined Services Entertainment section that his real talent showed. He got up on homemade stages and performed for tired soldiers who needed to laugh more than they needed food or rest. He learned something very important there. Comedy could be more than just jokes. It could save lives. He used this skill after the war was over. He looked up to the great British music hall comics, who were able to make people laugh with a mix of slapstick, parody, and wit. But American radio host Jack Benny was the person who inspired him the most. Alfred loved how he timed his words, how he could make quiet as funny as a punchline. In honor of him, he changed his name to Benny, which became the character that would define his career. When Variety Bandbox came out in 1947, it was Benny Hill's first radio show. People were interested in him because he had great timing and could play different characters, but he quickly learned that radio couldn't catch what he did best. By 1950, he was working on TV, which was a great place for his physical comedy, like his facial expressions, motions, and slapstick. He showed his range over the next 10 years. In 1962, he was the star of the anthology show Benny Hill, in which he changed into a different person for each episode. After 2 years, he shocked everyone by playing Nick Bottom in a TV version of A Midsummer Night's Dream. His comedic instincts showed that he could mix serious acting with humor, even when he was following Shakespeare's rules. He went back to radio with Benny Hill Time, a show that imitated James Bond, made fun of pop culture stars like the Beatles, and introduced strange characters like Fred Scuttle, who would show up again and again. With each part, his reputation grew in more ways. By the early 1960s, Benny Hill had gone from being a boy from Southampton to a growing star in British show business. So far, his life had been a training ground. Normal jobs had taught him things, Wartime service had given him a reason to live, and his heroes had inspired him. He was all set to move on. Benny Hill was getting ready to start the show that would make him famous all over the world. That next step would change television forever. The rise of The Benny Hill Show. The Benny Hill Show first aired on the BBC on January 15, 1955. At the time, it wasn't like other shows. Most comedy was based on wordplay or stand-up acts, but Hill brought something new to the table. He took songs, gags, and crazy characters from old British music hall shows and put them together with the speed of TV sketches. Every episode was like a variety show, with quick-fire scenes, jokes about current events, and weird physical gags. People quickly realized that this wasn't just another comedy. It was a show that broke the rules and made up new ones as it went along. It changed even more when the show moved to Thames Television in 1969. Hill made one-hour shows instead of shorter episodes that came out once a week. Because of that change, he had more room to make more complex plays, musical numbers, and bigger shows. The new plan worked great for him, and with Thames's help, the show went well around the world. It was shown in more than 140 countries by the 1970s. Hill's humor, which was often over-the-top and visual, didn't need to be translated. No matter where you were in the world, the UK, the US, or Australia, his chases, pratfalls, and parodies made you laugh. Laughter spread faster than words, and Hill's show was one of the best-known comedies to leave Britain. The personalities were what made it stand out. Fred Scuttle became a fan favorite because of how badly he spoke and how awkwardly he seemed. Another creation, Harry Hill, showed the helpless average person. And then there was Jackie Wright, the bald actor who was great with Hill for comedy. Hill would hit him over and over in the head, and Jackie's blank looks made the joke funnier every time. It felt like old friends were coming back every week to join the chaos because these figures kept showing up. But the ending scene of The Benny Hill Show was what made it unique. Every episode finished with a crazy chase to the fast-paced saxophone song, Yakety Sax. The scenes were shot with cameras that weren't turned all the way up, so everyone moved quickly, which made it even funnier. Police, nurses, grannies, and young women would all chase Hill through parks, streets, and halls at the same time. That scene became so well known that Yakety Sax is still immediately recognized as the Benny Hill theme. It stuck around after the show ended and became a cultural slang word for something silly or crazy. Hill added something new in the 1980s. Hill's Angels, a group of beautiful dancers. Their highly choreographed routines added sparkle and spectacle to the show, but they also caused a lot of disagreement. Fans thought it was cool and fun, but some people said it used women as props, which led to accusations that would come back to haunt Hill. Even though people didn't like the show, it became very famous. In the UK, it had over 21 million viewers at its peak in 1971, making it one of the most watched shows in the history of British TV. People in the United States also really liked it, and the show was nominated for an Emmy in 1980 and 1981. In 1984, Hill won the Rose d'Or, which is one of Europe's highest television awards. This solidified his status as a worldwide comic superstar. By the middle of the 1980s, Benny Hill was a famous figure all over the world, not just in Britain. His mix of slapstick, parody, and cheeky hints got him from small-town stages to fame around the world. Even though everyone was laughing a lot, trouble was slowly building up below the surface. Things were getting different for people, and one sketch was about to bring those differences to the forefront. Because behind all the music, chases, and fame, there was a scene ready to happen. It was so shocking that it would be the start of the end for Benny Hill's famous show. When comedy crossed the line, the Benny Hill Show was still watched by millions of people in the late 1980s, but it was getting more attention than ever. People have said for years that Hill's humor was out of date and that his constant chase scenes and sexy comments treated women like tools instead of people. Fans said the show was just harmless fun, so those comments didn't stick around for long. But then there was a sketch that couldn't be ignored. The scene was meant to be a parody of a beauty pageant, which is a setup that is easy to make up crazy things about. As the contestants walked across the stage in short outfits, Benny, who was playing a sexy host, emphasized every look and movement. The women were not characters with lines or stories. They were just visual jokes that were put in front of the camera to make people laugh. Many people had seen this kind of clever setup before, but the punchline went too far. I thought it was so rude that it took away the fun and left only shock. Instead of being light-hearted silliness, it seemed tasteless, and many people who used to support Hill started to think again about what they were seeing. This sketch was different because it made all the criticisms that had been growing clear. People who work in the media, women, and even other comedians had said Hill's show was sexist for years. They could now use a single scene as proof. What was once thought of as silly entertainment suddenly looked like it was made fun of. For younger people who are used to new types of entertainment, the joke wasn't just not funny. It was also embarrassing. A lot of people spoke out quickly. There were comments in newspapers that said the show wasn't up to date with the times. Broadcasters were asked if this kind of material belonged on primetime TV anymore. Feminists added to the criticism, saying that the sketch was more than just rude. It showed how women are constantly treated as objects in pop culture. It wasn't just casual watchers who agreed that what used to look funny now looked rude. Things had changed in society and on TV. There were more and more comics who weren't doing slapstick and were instead making sharp political satire. Benny Hill looked old overnight on shows like Saturday Live. The Beauty Queen sketch wasn't just a mistake in this new environment. It was a turning point in culture. There wasn't much backing for it, so critics had plenty of material to use against it. It's important to remember that this moment wasn't the only reason the show was stopped. It was the spark that set off years of anger. Ratings were already going down and costs were going up. But this sketch became the symbol of everything that was wrong with the show. People talked about the Benny Hill Show less about whether it was still funny and more about whether it was even okay. This was a huge change for a man who used to have over 20 million fans in Britain alone. Benny Hill was once praised as a slapstick master, but now he is seen as a symbol of old-fashioned morals. In reruns and syndication, people still laughed, but new shows no longer had the magic they used to. When the world turned against Benny Hill, it was getting different in Britain by the middle of the 1980s. The alternative comedians, a new group of artists, were taking the lead. Their acts were based on biting satire, political criticism, and a rejection of the old slapstick ways. One of the biggest was rising star Ben Elton, who co-wrote The Young Ones and often performs on Saturday Night Live. Because of how angry he was about social problems and how willing he was to fight the establishment, he became the face of a movement that wanted to get rid of old-fashioned comedy for good. For Elton, it was clear who he wanted to hit: Benny Hill. He said that the endless chase scenes and suggestive jokes on the Benny Hill Show fostered a society that saw women as objects and even encouraged crimes against them. What he said hit like lightning. Some people felt like a brave truth was finally being told. For some, it looked like an unfair attack on a man whose only tool was fun. The reaction happened right away. Critics who were sick of Hill's pranks backed Elton's claims and used them to say that the show wasn't funny and was actually bad for society. But Hill still had people guarding him. The Independent said Elton's criticism was pointless and that Hill was more of a relic than a threat, a guy from a different time than a threat to society. Q magazine made fun of Elton's sense of justice even more by saying that his claims were like accusing pianists of poaching elephants. These supporters said it was silly to connect a comic sketch to violence in the real world, and that comedy shouldn't be blamed for crimes that happen outside of the studio. But the cultural tide was changing. What was once funny and clean looked rude in the brighter lights of the 1980s. People were questioning gender roles, fairness, and portrayal, and people expected TV to keep up. People laughed at jokes that were funny in the 1960s, but they seemed old or even rude now. When the sketches were first made, they broke rules, but now they seemed stuck by them. A group called the Broadcasting Standards Council gave the argument more weight. Regulators made it clear that things that used to be fun were now seen through a moral view. It wasn't funny anymore to see half-dressed women being chased across the screen. It was an image that needed to end. Hill was still making people laugh around the world through reruns, but back home in Britain, the criticism was louder than the cheers. The late years of The Benny Hill Show were marked by this clash of styles. On the one hand, people all over the world who still watched for the comedy. On the other hand, comedy in the United States is quickly becoming smarter and more politically aware. Benny Hill was in the middle of a storm. He was praised abroad, but criticized at home. His style, which was his best quality, had become the reason people wanted him to leave. And as the complaints got stronger and the costs of making the show kept going up, Thames Television had to make a decision that led to the end of one of Britain's most popular shows. The end of an era. It wasn't as good as it used to be for The Benny Hill Show by the late 1980s. People from other countries still watched and laughed at the sped-up chase scenes and silly sketches, but in Britain, the ratings showed something different. Every week, fewer people watched as younger people moved on to newer types of humor. What used to be Britain's most watched show looked like something from the past. Things got worse behind the scenes when money ran out. It cost about €450,000 to make each episode of The Benny Hill Show. That was a huge amount of money in the 1980s, and it's about €1.4 million today. The show was pricey because it had lots of complicated sets, dance scenes, and a big cast. But over the past 20 years, they started to see the show as more of a burden than an advantage. It wasn't just the money. The issues also added to the weight. People who didn't like the show said it was out of date and harmful, and the famous Beauty Queen sketch became the focal point of all the complaints. Thames had no choice because numbers were going down, costs were going up, and there was backlash from the public. It was decided by the company in 1989 that The Benny Hill Show would no longer air after 21 years of episodes. Fans were shocked when the show was cancelled, but Hill didn't stop working. He tried to change himself with Benny Hill's World Tour in 1991. The goal was to bring his entertainment to international stages where he still had a lot of fans. Even though the plan was big, only one episode, Greetings from New York, was ever finished. There were old friends there, like Henry McGee, Bob Todd, and Sue Upton, but it didn't feel like a new beginning. He was not making as much progress in his business, and the comedy world had already moved on. When he wasn't being filmed, Benny Hill lived in a way that many people found strange. Even though he made a lot of money, He lived a simple life. He rented small apartments instead of buying homes, fixed his own clothes, and liked buying food at the grocery store because it was cheap. He never got married and kept his personal life out of the public eye, which led to a lot of rumors about his relationships. When the cameras were off, the man who seemed bigger than life on screen lived a simple, almost quiet life. His health was getting worse in the early 1990s. In February 1992, he had a small heart attack and was later told he had kidney failure. Doctors told Hill he should have surgery and treatment, but he refused both. Heart thrombosis killed him in his armchair on April 20, 1992. He was 68 years old. It's too bad that a new job offer came the same day, too late for him to see it. That's the story of Benny Hill's rise and fall. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and click the next video popping up on your screen.